Hi Caggie, how are you doing?
I'm good, how are you?
Good, thank you so much for joining our Out of Office series. How's your day going?
Really good, quite busy.
Good.
I'm very happy
I hear you're
to be
darting
here.
all around town today, so
A
it's one of
little
those
bit.
mental days. Well,
It
thank you very
is.
much. I'm going to get straight in because I know you've got a busy day. Spirituality. Have you always been a spiritual person?
Yes, I have. I haven't always been practicing it, but I would say from a pretty young age, I've always been interested in that sort of thing, but it wasn't particularly cool growing up. And I'd say it's definitely having its moment now a little bit more, especially in the sort of realms that I'm occupying.
Yeah, definitely. I think, a lot of people are kind of talking about it now and bringing that into their own lives. Mm-hmm. So when we met at a dinner a few weeks back, you mentioned Saturn returns and a kind of this discovery of how it affects your life. What is Saturn returns? I've never heard of it before.
So your Saturn return is something that happens in your late 20s as Saturn returns to the same place in the sky it was when you were born. So within the realms of astrology, this is viewed as your cosmic coming of age and initiation into adulthood. So this was really my moment when I reconnected to those aspects of myself, the more spiritual aspects that perhaps I'd been discarding or denying in my 20s. So it's often a time where people will suddenly change career, their friendships will totally shift, their relationship might suddenly go. It's quite a turbulent period of one's life. Yeah. It's got quite a bad reputation for that very reason, but ultimately what it seeks is your authenticity.
That's so interesting. I'm sure a lot of people will relate to that change and in everything and that real big milestone in your life. Is that how you came across it with all those changes happening for you?
Yes, I was actually living in LA at the time, and I was 27, and I felt like I was, about to go through a lot of change, and someone there told me that I was about to go through my Saturn return, and for whatever reason, I just became very hooked on the concept. I actually started writing a project around it, as everyone that lives in LA does. That was a TV show, and then I came back to London, sort of didn't forget about it, but I parked the idea, and then life just happened and everything really quickly changed for me. A big breakup was a massive catalyst, and then I was encouraged by a lot of people to start a podcast, and then I knew that actually that's what that project was going to be about.
So you have the podcast and the book Saturn Returns, Your Cosmic Coming of Age. Which came first? And tell me about the story of the book and the lowdown of all of it.
Yeah, so the podcast came first, and it was a project. So, well, I guess the idea came first, and then when I was back in London, I was pursuing music at the time, and it was 2019, and I decided to start a podcast about Saturn return, helping people navigate this period of life, and sharing some, of the thought leaders or people that had helped me on my own journey. Then the pandemic happened, and I'd already recorded the majority of season 1. And it was a question of, do I pause this project and wait till life starts again, or do I launch it now? And I'm so grateful that I did, because it was that moment in time where everyone was at home on their own. The sort of tagline of the show is "You are not alone," which was not because of the pandemic. That was always there, and it lent itself to that moment in time because people were leaning on those practices and more esoteric things because they were struggling. Yeah. So that's where we kind of developed our core audience, and then actually, it was after episode 1, season 1, when a editor from a publishing house reached out and said, "Would you ever consider making this a book?" So it happened all quite quickly, but then it took me a while to actually write the book.
What's it like writing a book?
I still can't really believe that I did write a book.
It's incredible. It's a tremendous feat.
Thank you. Well, I'm quite dyslexic, so that was the way that I went about it was chaotic and mad, but it came together in the end. I think you have to find your moments of inspiration and the parts of the day where, we always have this romanticized idea that we'll go to a cottage and for 4 days do nothing but write. And it didn't work like that for me. It was usually first thing in the morning before the rest of the world had woken up. That's when I got it done.
Yeah, I mean, when you're writing, you have to find those moments that flow where you're inspired or just
Yeah, and
let it come.
or sometimes you do have to sort of force it. It's a discipline of sitting down, and even if only a few sentences come out and they're rubbish, like at least you've been disciplined and sat down.
You're not an astrologer. I know you're quite careful about saying you're not an astrologer.
I'm not an I'm sort of a person that brings these things to the masses. So I'm always pulling on different esoteric practices. And obviously the umbrella of the whole show and book is Saturn Returns. But I see that as a sort of a gateway to many, many things. But I have an astrologer that I connected with about 7 years ago. So when I was living in LA. She's called Nora, and she did the contribution to the book, which was the sort of deep dive of astrology. And she has been sort of a spirit guide to me.
I think it's so lovely to have that. I'm hugely into it. I think there's a kind of Marmite effect. You love it or you hate it. But if someone does want to get into it or they're interested by it, how do you even navigate getting into astrology?
Well, I think the beautiful thing at the moment is because of social media, it's having a moment, I think, for two main reasons. One, social media means that it's accessible in a way that it wasn't before. And two, because I think people now are much more interested in what their purpose is, what the meaning of life is, and also because religion isn't playing quite the same role that it used to for many people. We still have this appetite for something outside the realms of linear logical thought, and astrology kind of pulls into that. It gives us a sense of purpose and meaning, and that things are happening to us for a reason rather than just chaotic and mad.
It's almost answers. We're looking for answers to questions that we don't know the answers to.
Yeah, and I think it's beautiful because it's quite abstract, but also when you speak to an astrologer, for them it's very mathematical and precise.
Yeah, I imagine.
But what I will say is for people looking to get into it, I use it as a tool for personal development and introspection. I'm by no means married to it in that I don't let it govern my life as much as people would think, considering it's a big part of what I do. But for every astrologer that I've ever met, it's always the same thing. They are not learning this, they are remembering. They always say that to me. It's like a language for them. Whenever they discover it through whatever means, they just consume this information and it's like they're remembering a language. Whereas for me, I feel like even if I really tried to study it, there's only so much that I can kind of consume of it. When I'm speaking to Nora, after about an hour and a half, I sort of like glaze over. I'm like, she's lost me because it's just so vast.
Yeah.
So, you know, if it resonates for you, perhaps you're one of those people that might just gravitate towards it in that sense.
Not that much. I'll read my star sign. That's like as far as I'll go. So you talk about feeling disconnected in your 20s, and again, that's something I'm sure a bunch of people will relate to. Outside of understanding Saturn returns, how do you regain that connection?
It's a great question. It's a big question. I think that the irony in a way was quite poetic actually, is that I found my connection to myself by speaking about the disconnection one has in their 20s. Okay. I think our 20s are a series of messy experiences where we're trying things on for size, and I don't think you can ever really get them wrong. We put on a lot of pressure on ourselves to have everything filed into some kind of meaning by the time we turn 30. But really, I think your 30s are often just the beginning. My 20s, I often refer to them as that I was living inauthentically, and I've actually changed my mind on that. I think I was just trying to be who I thought I needed to be and pulling on aspects of my character that were true, but denying others that were also true. And I think in your 30s, you sort of reclaim those and you care less what people think.
Oh, yes.
And you realise that actually living authentically and truthfully to you, whatever that looks like, is success.
So I was going to ask you actually, what advice would you give to yourself? But perhaps that's exactly what it is.
I wouldn't, if I was to go, I know people often say, like, if you could go back and give yourself one piece of advice, what would it be? I actually wouldn't give myself any advice because I think all the mistakes, all the heartbreaks, all the lessons and all the learnings were necessary. And if it wasn't for those experiences, I wouldn't have found myself in this bizarre position that I'm in. You couldn't really write this trajectory, but that's just how life works.
How much do you think people can actually leave to the stars?
How much can
How much do you, because we go, you know, you speak to astrologers and you say it's all scientific, but how much can you actually leave to the stars?
Well, astronomy and astrology were sort of one of the same, and then they departed ways from each other. And astronomy was viewed as a scientific, more reliable practice, and astrology became more of a charlatan's practice. But actually, we can see that people are really leaning into it and relying on it. And I think especially in the current climate in the world that we live in, that is quite chaotic and unpredictable, if you look at the astrological predictions of 2020, they were quite accurate of what has happened. So, but at the same time, you know, I find it a comforting tool because it feels like everything's happening because it's a necessary process, not only for the individual, but also the collective.
You lost me in some of that. It sounded very deep and very intense, but fascinating. What is astrocartography? Is that the right way of saying it?
Yes, astrocartography is it's a form of astrology that allows you to see planetary alignments that are going through geographical locations in the world. So you might have a very profound spiritual experience in a place that you've never been, or a sense of home in a place that you've never been. And if you look at astrocartography, it can tell you perhaps why that you might have a alignment through that place. So I find it really, and you can use it as a way of traveling, but I always find that it's more useful when you go somewhere. For instance, I've had it with Sydney. I've always had this real strong connection since I was about 11 years old to Sydney. I wrote in my diary when I was 11 how in love I was with this country and this city and this place. And then years later, someone did my astrocartography and I had a sign that went straight through it, or a planetary alignment that went straight through it. And that is signifies where you feel a sense of home. So you can also go to places that will be good for your personal development, that like you can have a Saturn line that might be about responsibility, kind of growing up.
Do you think people can use that then to determine where they should travel next?
You can, yeah. You can go for love, you can go for maturing, you can go for a sense of home. There's plenty of things, but it'd be worth seeing someone that can actually help you understand, because you can look it up, anyone can listen to this and look it up, but it probably wouldn't make sense to you unless you had someone telling you what it meant.
So you go somewhere, see how it feels, and you can actually discover it that way otherwise.
No, so as in seeing your chart.
Oh, I see, seeing your chart.
Yeah,
okay.
so similar to if you look at your birth chart, for most people they'll be like, I have no idea what that means, but if you have an astrologer that can talk you through it and what it means, it will make more sense.
Where do you feel most spiritually grounded? Is that Australia? Is that Sydney?
I mean, that is the place where I feel a real sense of home, and it's not my home, so it's a really bizarre thing, but yeah, but it's not very accessible because it's as far away as as anywhere could possibly be. But other places that I feel a sense of home is actually I've just moved out of it, but my old flat was like my sacred space, so I've been quite sad leaving that.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, but I guess it's important to try and cultivate a sense of home wherever you are.
Yeah, absolutely. Downtime. How do you spend your downtime? What do you do in your free time?
There's a place in Ladbroke Grove called Love Supreme that's an amazing yoga studio, and that's one of my favourite things to do. And they do like chanting and stuff. That's
Nice.
cool.
Very calming.
Yeah.
So is that part of your daily routine for your self-care?
It is. Exercise is really important for me and my mental health. I can really notice if a couple of weeks go by and I've been busy and I say I don't have time to do any exercise, how it impacts me.
Do you watch TV?
I do watch TV. I
you-
love watching TV.
What have you binged recently?
I binged Baby Reindeer. I was
Brilliant.
watching it with my boyfriend, who we rarely align on TV shows because I like sort of death and destruction. Like
I did not expect you to say that,
no one
admittedly.
expects. But the darker the better. Whereas he's like, I don't want to watch that before going to bed, and he also thinks that it makes me more anxious, which is probably true. But we were watching Baby Reindeer and we were like, we found something we both like. And then it got to episode, I think, 3, and he was like, I'm out.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, I'm in. And I just watched the whole thing. I found it incredible. Yeah.
It's brilliant. I think that actually the real woman is doing a case against the character. There's
I
something
mean,
crazy happening.
we could talk about it for hours.
That's
There's
another
so many layers to it. That
series.
it's just the fact that it's his story and that he shared it in the way that he did. I was like, whoa,
Yeah.
I've never seen anything like that before. So yeah.
No, that it is. It's a brilliant show. And what about books? Do you get much time to read?
I do. I have to read quite a lot for my work as well because
Okay.
I'm often interviewing people that have a book out. That's usually the moment where I get the people that I want on the podcast, is because they're doing a book tour. But at the moment, for just myself, I'm reading Women That Run With Wolves. So I'm kind of dipping in and out of it. It's a book that I've had for many, many years, but I've often been told by friends that it's a book that sort of comes to you when you're ready for it.
Interesting.
It's tales.
All right. All right. I like that. What's the last thing you do before you sleep and the first thing you do when you wake up?
I don't particularly have anything that's that ritualistic. I would say I love a bath. A bath is kind of like my signal for the end of the day.
Nice.
And I also love tea and chocolate.
3 winning things.
Yeah, but my bath is actually, that is a bit of a ritual. I'll have all sorts of potions in there and candles and incense and yeah.
Quick fire questions.
Yes.
What is your coffee order?
An oat flat white. I'm also very, I know it's quick fire, but I'm really particular about coffee. Like I will go far to find the best coffee.
I hear you. I'm the same as you. I'll only go to one particular coffee shop. Doesn't matter where I am, but they only them.
Which one?
Oh, that's a plug.
Yeah.
You?
Which one?
Gales.
Oh, really?
Yeah, where do you go?
Mine's Flying Horse Coffee.
I don't know where that is.
They've got a few. They've got one in Goldbourne Road, though.
Oh, interesting. I'll try that one. Favorite cuisine?
Japanese, probably, yeah.
Favorite Japanese restaurant?
Well, it's a sort of fusion one, but I really like Los Mochis. It's Mexican and Japanese, which is in Notting Hill.
Your perfect date?
Perfect date. Picnic on Hampstead Heath.
Gorgeous. That's really lovely. If you had an extra 5 hours in the day, how would you spend it?
Probably having a bath and sleeping.
Also beautiful. If you're down, what cheers you up? Having a bath and sleeping.
No, I think that can make things worse.
Yeah.
But my boyfriend really cheers me up.
Oh,
when I'm
that's
down.
nice.
He's very good at kind of making me laugh. All my friends.
Good. He'll be happy to hear that. What's the best compliment you've ever received?
What is the best compliment I've ever received? One actually from my boyfriend, which was, he once said that Julia Roberts had very sparkly eyes, and then he said, "You have the same sparkle in your eyes," which I thought was the nicest thing.
Keeper.
I was like, wow, that's so lovely.
Yeah. Very nice. What's your go-to drink?
What, like an alcoholic drink?
Or non-alcoholic?
Probably a spicy margarita.
Nice. What song are you listening to on repeat?
I'm listening to Billie Eilish's album on repeat. Just the whole album is amazing.
Do you have a favourite item of clothing or jewellery or a beauty product?
My favourite item of jewellery is this, actually. And I'm not big on jewellery, but I don't know, can you see? Have I got it the right way around?
You do have it the right round.
From a brand called Soru, and I love it.
Oh, I like it. Does it have a meaning to it?
I don't know. I just
looks
like
nice.
it.
Okay,
I just like it. And then clothing. I have this skirt and sort of is it a bandeau top? Is that what you call it? From Bash, that's really old, but I've honestly worn it so many times and I just love it.
The go-to.
Yeah.
Is there a trend that you're totally over?
A trend that I'm a bit over is, and it's probably just in my own echo chamber of the things that I see, but it's like people eating raw meat. I'm not into it. It really bumps me out. Raw milk and raw meat is like the new veganism.
What?
That's
like the polar
I know
opposite.
it
That
is the
doesn't make
polar opposite,
sense.
but people that were vegan are now eating raw meat and raw milk.
I mean, that's horrible.
It's a thing.
That's a big old jump.
Yeah.
If you could be born in any decade, which one would it be?
The 1920s.
Interesting. Why is that?
I just think it was sophisticated and cool.
Fair. Now, you've already written a book. So this question is, if you were writing a second book,
Yes.
although early on in life, what would it be called and why?
Well, I don't want to say what it would be called because I actually do have a second book and I don't want to put out the name that I'm not 100% sure of. But what I would like to do is a poetry book.
Okay.
Yes, yes. I write a lot of poetry, so I feel like my second book will be a poetry book.
Fair enough. Thank you, Caggie. So lovely to spend some time with you.
You
Get to know you,
too.
hear why everyone in their late 20s goes through such a nasty time, but we get out of it at the end.
Exactly.
Thank you very much for your
Thank
time.
you for having me.